Now this video may not be quite the video people were expecting. I think at this point I've had a couple of requests for Call of Duty videos, and they are coming, but they will have to take their time. Because today what I wanted to talk about is The Last Guardian, and give my review and thoughts on this particular video game. Now this game is going to be quite unusual for a lot of the games I showcased on my channel, and that is partly because it itself is an unusual game. This game started development all the way back in 2007. It's been delayed and then it came out a few years ago. Now what the premise of this game is, essentially it's a puzzle game. You end up finding yourself with this mythical creature called Tricot. All you know about him is he's a man-eating creature, he's something to be feared, but through some weird twist of fate you end up stuck together and you have to rely on each other to get out. The puzzles start out quite simple, where you have to pick things up and move things and go through small holes and just try and work out how you can let Tricot out, and then eventually it becomes more about how do you approach certain situations, because some of the puzzles require you to tell Tricot where to go so he can jump up to really high objects that you otherwise couldn't reach. There's a lot of variance in these puzzles, and as you get further through the game there's a lot more different mechanics in these puzzles, and you slowly get drip fed more things you can do in certain puzzles and action sequences, and I personally found that quite good. There were certain points where it felt a little bit repetitive because you were doing very similar tasks just in different places, but overall they gave you just enough new things to do that was neither overwhelming nor boring, which is one thing that I did quite like. However, this game does feel quite dated in its design. To me, when I first started playing this, it felt kind of like a PlayStation 2 game. It was very PlayStation 2 styled in the gameplay. You don't really get many hints. You're kind of left to your own devices to figure out how to beat the puzzles. And in some ways, that was quite a nice refresher. A lot of games, you've got a great big icon telling you where to go. You've got cutscenes left, right and centre. And it is a very nurtured sort of gameplay, whereas this game you're just thrown in and you have to work it all out for yourself for the most part, which in some ways is refreshing, but at the same time you do get some puzzles where you sometimes just have to Google them to find out how to beat them. You just get certain points where you have to tell Tricot to do something and he just for some reason won't, and it gets a little bit frustrating. Also, the control scheme doesn't help this. You've got a control scheme which is vastly different to any other third-person game, and it makes it very awkward sometimes to perform pretty normal actions. And then to top it all off, you've then got a camera which does whatever the hell it wants. The camera in this game is probably the worst thing about this entire game. It'll suddenly warp through walls, you'll just suddenly get a black screen because it's gotten stuck. You'll be trying to climb up Tricot and then the camera flips directions and you find you're now crawling the other way, and it gets really frustrating. There were some incredibly frustrating parts of this game, and it did mean that for like the first 5 hours or so, I just couldn't play the game for more than half an hour to an hour. I would get either stuck on a puzzle or I would just get completely frustrated by some of the mechanics in the game and I'd have to switch off. Especially with some of the barrel throwing puzzles, my goodness, they could get annoying. Because it just almost felt like your character just wasn't doing what you wanted them to. It was a little bit awkward and it just didn't lead to an enjoyable gameplay experience. But the one thing this game absolutely aces, and is what redeems this game, is the bond that you playing the child and Tricot form. That bond is absolutely fantastic. Even though the game was frustrating, it almost immediately hits you how technically impressive Tricot is in this game. He does come across as an actual animal, and the longer you go through the game, the more it actually feels like he's an animal. He kind of becomes your pet. This weird dumb bird dog with a terrible camera becomes your pet in this game. And it's fantastic. You get further through the game, you see them bonding more and more, and you see the dependencies also increasing at the same time that you're both able to do new things in the game. It makes that bond even more intense. And then later on in the game, you get a big reveal of the huge story arc, what has actually gone on, how did you get there, why are your fates intertwined. It is fantastic, and it absolutely saved this game, because otherwise it would have been a mostly frustrating experience. But that story and the narrative really made this game fantastic. In all honesty, this game is a game that a lot of people probably shouldn't play. It's not going to go down as the single greatest game ever made, but at the same time, you cannot ignore how technically impressive the game is, and also how gripping the narrative is once it really kicks in. It is a fantastic game. If you have the patience to sit through those first 4 or 5 hours, getting used to the awkward controls, the terrible camera, and some of the really annoying puzzles, and the constant prompts the game gives you, if you can sit through that and you can be patient enough to get through it and get to the really interesting parts of the story, this game will be a fantastic experience and you will love it. But if you're not quite sure you've got that patience, I would possibly suggest not getting this game. I would, however, recommend that if you do want to see a little bit more of this game, there is a review by Neebs Gaming which will be linked on the top right hand screen with a card. I would highly recommend watching this even if you're not actually interested in picking up the game, because it's just really funny. But overall, for the adventure and story this game takes you on, it's an 8 or 9 out of 10. For the actual gameplay itself, probably a 4 or 5. It's a game that will split your opinions as you're playing through it, because whilst the gameplay gets very frustrating, you can't help but be completely gripped by the bond between this child and his weird strange bird dog with a terrible camera. But I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Please feel free to leave any questions in the comment section down below. I've been the guy from the Gamertag, and I'll see you on another video.